Hello, and welcome to Saving Grace Education. In this year's 6th history lesson on Benin, we will be looking at the story of Aweka. The aim of this lesson is for you to find out how Benin's past is recorded through a range of sources, and for you to be able to find out about the story of how Aweka came to be the Oba of the Benin Kingdom. The following statements are today's success criteria. I can compare and discuss the ways in which British and African history has been recorded. I can tell you what I understand about Africa's oral tradition of history telling. I can act out different parts of the story of Aweka. I can create a storyboard of the story of Aweka. And I can compare different versions of the story of Aweka. Circle of Whispers. Can you think of one fact that you have learned about in the Kingdom of Benin? Don't say it out loud. Just spend 1 minute thinking about your fact. Arrange yourselves into a circle. One of you will say your fact. You need to whisper that fact into the ear of the person next to you. They need to whisper what they heard into the next person's ear, and so on. Does the fact return to the beginning of the circle in the same way as it began? What has changed? Try and answer the following questions. Is the way in which people record history any different to this? Can you think of ways in which it may be different? And how might it be the same? Recording history. This is the Heiferd Mappa Mundi, which was created in Britain around AD 1285. It is the largest medieval map known to exist. It attempts to show a map of the world. Here is a close-up of what the creator of the map believed existed towards the south of the River Nile. It represents a complete lack of knowledge or understanding of the continent of Africa and its people. Note the headless people with eyes and mouths in their chest. Europeans have often chosen to write down or produce pictures to record history. But does this mean that it is always the true picture of what happened? We have to look at all the sources available to build a bigger picture of what actually happened in the past. This could be from looking at artifacts and archaeological evidence, for example. This is the Bayou Tapestry, made in the 15th century to show the Battle of Hastings, which took place in 1066. During this battle, the Normans took over control of Britain and William the Conqueror came to power. Just 50 years or so after the Battle of Hastings, the people of the Benin Kingdom were looking for a new king. But how do we know about how Benin found a new king? Most African societies have passed their history down through different generations by word of mouth and can trace this history back for hundreds or even thousands of years. This oral tradition is history that isn't written, but instead relies on the importance of the human voice and listening. In recent times, there have been fewer storytelling events within African communities which provide the backbone of this form of oral history. Nigerian historian Jacob Agerefba realized that many of his people's histories and traditions would be lost unless he began to write down some of the stories of Benin's history. He interviewed older men who lived during the 19th century in order to record the oldest forms of the tales and traditions as possible. One of the stories he recorded was of how the Yoruba people of Ife and the Edo people of the Benin Kingdom became linked when a new king came to power. Oral tradition tells us that this new dynasty was created in around AD 1180. The first ruler of this dynasty was Oranmiyan from Ife. He ruled for only a few years before returning to Ife and leaving his son, born to him by an Edo wife, to rule Benin. His son was named Aweka. Aweka became the new Oba, and so the Oba dynasty began. Have a look at these timelines of British and Benin history. Do you know of any other important events that happened in either Africa or Britain to add to this timeline? The Story of Aweka. This is a shortened version of the Story of Aweka, a short history of Benin, published by Jacob Igarefba in 1968. The Ogiso Dynasty ruled Benin in the 12th century. Oworo, the last Ogiso ruler, banished his only son Ikaladeran from Benin after lies were told him about Isacho, his senior wife. 3 years later, the lies told about him were found to be untrue, and messengers were sent to ask him to return home, but he refused. He even dug pits to protect himself, and many soldiers were killed when they fell into them. The people of Benin had hoped that he would become the next ruler, but gave up this idea on hearing what had happened to the soldiers. Woro did not rule over his people very well, and they eventually banished him. For the next few years, they did not have an Ogiso, but they asked Evian, one of the most important men in Benin, to look after them. However, the people were not happy when Evian tried to make his eldest son the next ruler, saying that only an Ogiso could do this. The people of Benin asked Otoduwa, the powerful Oba of a neighboring city called Ife, to send one of his sons to be their ruler. In AD 1170, Otoduwa sent Prince Oranmiyan, his son, to rule over the people of Benin. Oranmiyan lived in a palace which was built for him in Benin, married a beautiful Edo lady called Erenwinde, and had a son called Aweka. However, Oranmiyan said that only someone born in Benin should rule it, and made his son Aweka the Oba. This was to be called the Aweka Dynasty. After having read this, see if you can complete the family trees. Check your version of the family trees. Do you have any questions about it? The Story of Aweka roleplay. In your group, read through and think carefully about the part of Aweka's story that you have been given. Decide who will be each character and think carefully about what each person will say to each other. One or more of you may need to be a narrator. You have 10 minutes to create your roleplay before you perform it to the class. The Story of Aweka storyboard. Imagine that you are a film director and you want to create a film about the story of Aweka. Create a storyboard from the different parts of the story. A different version of events. Can you think of any problems with this version of the story of Aweka? Why would the people of the Benin Kingdom ask people from Ife to help them if they had no connection with them? How would they have known that the people of Ife even existed? What happened to Prince Ekalderan? How would anyone have known where to find him? Some people and historians believe that these things happened instead. After wandering into the forest, Ekalderan came to Ife, where he won the hearts of the people. The Yoruba people in Ife believed that he descended from heaven to help them, and they called him Oduduwa. His knowledge of how to rule, magical powers, and kindness led Oduduwa to become the ruler of Ife. Some years later, his father asked Oduduwa to return to Benin. He refused, but he sent his son Oranmian in his place. Try and answer the following questions. How do these different ideas change the story of Aweka? Why do you think that this story is so important to the history of Benin that people still debate and talk about what they believe happened today? One of the main differences is about who Oduduwa was. Was he actually Prince Ekaladeran? This would mean that Aweka was actually Ogiso Owodo's great-grandson. What do you think? For this activity, cut out the different parts of your storyboard. Can you add extra parts to your storyboard using these different versions of events? Where should these parts go? Do you need to take out or change any parts of the story you already have? Have a look at the different parts of the story from different versions in yellow and ask yourself, which parts of the story remain the same? And how could this help historians to decide on some facts about what happened? The aim of this lesson was for you to be able to find out how Benin's past is recorded through a range of sources, and for you to be able to find out about the story of how Aweka came to be the Oba of the Benin Kingdom. You are successful in this lesson if you are able to make the following statements. I can compare and discuss the ways in which British and African history has been recorded. I can tell you what I understand about Africa's oral tradition of history telling. I can act out different parts of the story of Aweka. I can create a storyboard of the story of Aweka, and I can compare different versions of the story of Aweka. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson.